Florida and North Carolina both have their perks. And having lived in both states, I can tell you there are some major differences that might surprise you. And as a realtor here in Charlotte, I've helped a lot of people relocate from Florida to North Carolina. And I've seen firsthand what they love and what catches them completely off guard. So I have some insights for you that I think might help make or break your decision. So one of the biggest differences between the two states will be the differences in lifestyles. And what's gonna work best for you really depends on what kind of day-to-day experience you're looking for. Now, when people think of Florida, they typically picture tropical weather, vacations, and beach life. And in most of the places that people are moving to in Florida, that's pretty much what you're gonna get. I lived in multiple cities in Florida, and that was my experience. Of course, you're still gonna have your work life and your responsibilities, but your time off can be really amazing. And even though there are smaller inland towns and rural communities that might have a different feel, the reality is that if you're thinking about moving to Florida, you're probably looking to move to an area that's really shaped by beach life or entertainment and tourism because who doesn't want to live in paradise? And if you love being by the water, it's going to be a really hard state to be. The beaches are beautiful. And it's one of the huge reasons it's one of the top tourist destinations in the world. And that's another really cool thing about living here is that people from all over the world don't just visit, they end up making it their home. Depending on where you live in Florida, you can experience this really great cultural diversity. Their ethnic food scene blows North Carolina's out of the water. And beyond that, the state is built around entertainment. You have cities like Orlando, which has some of the best amusement parks in the world. Miami and a lot of South Florida are internationally known not just for their nightlife and art scene, but for high-end luxury living. And aside from the major cities, you have tons of towns up and down the coast. Places like Sarasota and Vero Beach, and while they can be pretty tourist heavy certain times of the year, you can still get a pretty laid back and residential lifestyle. But just know if you live in any of these coastal or entertainment-driven towns, tourism will become a part of your life. During peak season, you're gonna notice that the grocery stores get a lot more crowded. You're probably gonna avoid certain beaches and areas because they get really crowded and over congested. And you do get used to it, but it does become a part of your day-to-day. Now in North Carolina, the lifestyle is gonna be a lot different. So for one, we have a wider range of lifestyles depending on where in the state you live. This state is great if you're looking for somewhere that is full of variety, laid back, and community driven. Even in our major cities like Charlotte, I've lived all over the country. Charlotte has been by far the easiest place to meet people. There's just a warmth and friendliness here that makes it very easy to feel like home. Now, unlike the major cities in Florida, Charlotte is not going to be a tourist destination, but it is a really easy place to live. It's kind of like the city was designed for people to actually enjoy living here. Because even though we are the second largest city in the Southeast, it never feels too overwhelming. So you get all of those big city perks. Like you get tons of restaurants and bars, professional sports teams, concerts, even lake life, but without the chaos or the cost, just the hustle and bustle of a major metro like Miami. And that's just Charlotte, because depending on where you live in a state, your experience will be vastly different. For instance, if you are on the coast of North Carolina, it's gonna feel completely different than the rest of the state, and it's gonna feel a lot different than Florida's coastal towns. North Carolina beaches are a lot more relaxed and less commercialized. They're a lot more locally driven. There's still tourism, but it's not gonna be Florida tourism. Our beaches aren't as built up or as densely populated, so you're not gonna find these massive high-rise hotels lining our coast. Even the beaches near Wilmington, which will be our most tourist-heavy beach towns, aren't going to have the same traction as a St. Pete or a Clearwater Beach. And the overall atmosphere is going to be different too. So while Florida is going to be tropical and lively, North Carolina beaches are going to have a lot more of a kind of quiet, quaint coastal charm feel. It's going to be a more relaxed pace of life. And then if you go across the state to Western North Carolina, it'll be completely different than anywhere else. This is where the mountains really shape the life here. And it's not just scenic. There is so much to experience, from hiking, whitewater rafting, even skiing. Beyond the ski resorts, you have beautiful lakes and rivers. And North Carolina has more waterfalls than almost any other state. There's even a region here called the Land of the Waterfalls. But at the end of the day, the type of lifestyle that you have is really going to be dependent on what it costs to live there. And there are some big surprises when it comes to the cost of living between the states. So at first glance, North Carolina and Florida seem pretty comparable. But here's where things get interesting. If you look at it city by city, the picture is going to change. So most of my clients that are relocating from Florida come from places like Tampa Bay, Orlando, or South Florida. And when you compare those cities to Charlotte, which is one of the most expensive cities in North Carolina, Charlotte actually comes in cheaper. But the real surprise is income. The median income in Charlotte is around $78,000 per year. And when you compare that to Orlando and Tampa and Miami, it looks like your money is going to stretch you farther if you live in Charlotte. Now, Florida does have one huge advantage over us. They have no state income tax. And I get that that is a huge plus. But North Carolina's taxes are still pretty low, and they're actually getting even lower. Right now, we are at 4.25%, and it's dropping to 3.99% by 2026. But where we really start to see the cost difference add up is going to be insurance. So Florida is in the middle of a pretty serious insurance crisis. And yes, home insurance and car insurance has gone up nationally, but Florida is going to be in a league all on its own. To put it in perspective, the average annual home insurance premium in Florida is around $5,000, and that's 3 times the national average. Here in North Carolina, we're only about $2,000 per year, and that's actually below the national average. And this isn't just a financial issue, this is an emotional issue too. Because of the hurricanes and rising risk, insurers are either leaving Florida completely or making coverage really expensive. This is a level of stress that I'm seeing firsthand. I have a client right now in Florida who wants to relocate to Charlotte, and she can't sell her home because of insurance issues. Meanwhile, here in North Carolina, our home insurance is a lot more affordable and predictable. Now, if you live in a hurricane-prone area on the coast of North Carolina, of course your rates will likely be higher. But for most of the state, especially here in Charlotte, a standard insurance policy is really all you need. Additional coverage like flood insurance or hurricane coverage is going to be more situational than it is the norm. So the bottom line is when you step back and you look at the full picture, the cost of living, the income, and the cost of insurance, North Carolina will typically offer you a more predictable and balanced financial lifestyle. And for a lot of people, that peace of mind is worth a lot more than saving a few percentage points on your income tax. And since we are on that thrilling topic of income tax, let's talk the jobs and the economy, because that is a huge factor for people deciding between where to move. Both states have strong economies and are consistently ranked among the top places people are moving to. And when you have that much population growth, it makes sense that both economies are doing pretty well. Now, Florida does have one of the biggest economies in the country, over 1.7 trillion. But here's the thing, Florida's population is double the size of North Carolina. North Carolina actually has a slightly higher economic output per person. But numbers aside, if you're moving to one of these states, what really matters is how each one makes their money. What are the job opportunities like? So no surprise here, but Florida's economy is largely driven by tourism and hospitality. These states thrive on vacationers, which means industries like hotels and theme parks and entertainment play a really huge role. If you work in any of these fields, Florida is going to have a lot of opportunity. And beyond tourism, Florida is going to be a leader in aerospace, aviation, and real estate. So it's not all beaches and Disney. Now, North Carolina's economy is going to be completely different. The Research Triangle, which includes Raleigh, Durham, and Chapel Hill, is a powerhouse for pharmaceuticals, IT jobs, and biotech. And this makes it one of the top regions in the country for medical and tech innovation. Companies like Google, Microsoft, and GSK all have major operations here. And then you have Charlotte, and we're the second largest banking hub in the United States, right behind New York. You cannot throw a rock in this city without hitting someone in finance. Major banks like Bank of America and Wells Fargo all have headquarters or major operations here. And we are rapidly expanding into tech and medical sectors as well, so there are a lot of opportunities. So when it comes to housing, there are some really key differences that my clients have noticed when it comes to the home prices, the HOAs, the types of homes and types of neighborhoods you can buy. So on average, a home in Florida is going to cost you more, especially if you're by any of those coastal cities. And if you're looking to buy in South Florida, prices are probably going to be significantly higher than just about anywhere else in North Carolina. But when we talk about housing costs, it's not just about the price of the house itself. We also have to factor in additional home cost. And this is where you really start to see some differences add up. Property taxes are going to be slightly higher in Florida, with an effective tax rate of 0.91% compared to 0.82% in North Carolina. And while that difference isn't huge, when you factor in Florida's higher insurance costs, North Carolina typically does end up being more affordable overall. And another major difference between housing costs will be HOAs and CDDs. Now, both states have a lot of homes in HOAs. Florida is going to have significantly more though. About 44% of their homes are in an HOA compared to North Carolina, which only has 29%. And the HOA fees in Florida have been increasing, especially for condos and townhomes because of insurance issues and storm damage. I actually have friends who own a condo in Florida that just got hit with a really big bill after the last storm because their HOA didn't have enough money in reserves to cover the damage. So definitely keep this in mind. But the biggest difference when it comes to cost are going to be CDDs. And if you've never heard of this, you're not alone. A lot of people haven't. So CDD stands for a Community Development District. And this is something that you're only going to find in Florida. You're not going to find this in North Carolina. And this is essentially a special tax district to pay for infrastructure, roads, and amenities in a new community. So instead of the developer paying for these costs up front, you as a homeowner will pay this as part of your property tax bill every year. And they can range anywhere from like $1,000 to $3,000 per year. And that is on top of your HOA dues. But one thing I did learn is that it's not always very transparent if you have to pay this up front. So if you're buying a home in Florida, definitely make sure you have full transparency as to what the actual cost will be. Now, if you're paying those CDD fees, you're definitely getting something. And that's one of the biggest differences my buyers point out between Florida and North Carolina are the types of neighborhoods and houses available. Florida is packed with master plan communities, and some of these feel like five-star resorts. They have golf courses and multiple pools and massive clubhouses. Now, you will have to pay a pretty decent HOA or CDD fee if you live in one of these communities, but if you like that resort-style lifestyle, this might be totally worth it. And while I can't speak to every market in North Carolina, I can tell you that these type of communities aren't as common here in Charlotte. Now, we do have some master plan neighborhoods with amenities like pools, sports courts, and trails, but not nearly as many or to the same scale as what you might find in Florida. So to contrast neighborhoods in Florida, a lot of our Charlotte neighborhoods have grown more organically, especially when you get closer to the city. In these neighborhoods, you can find a mix of old and new. So you'll have a 1930s historic bungalow sitting right next to an ultra-modern new build. Our neighborhoods just aren't as pre-planned. Now, this does start to change as you start moving away from the cities. So we're gonna find a lot more newer master plan neighborhoods. And it's not just the neighborhoods. The houses themselves feel really different. In Florida, houses are largely built for the climate. That's why you see a lot of stucco exterior and tile roofs and tile floors and single-story ranches. They just hold up better in the storms. So across most of the state, the majority of the houses will have a Mediterranean and Spanish style. North Carolina, on the other hand, has a lot more variety. So instead of one dominant housing style, you're going to see everything. And depending on where you are in the state, the architecture can shift. You can find A-frames and cabins in the mountains, beach cottages and houses on stilts by the coast. And in cities like Charlotte, you have everything from traditional to ultra-modern. The other major differences that people point out are the green spaces and lack of pools. So here, the yards tend to be bigger, greener, and more lush and natural. Whereas in Florida, it's almost standard for a house to have a pool or a closed-in lanai, especially by the coast and in the suburban neighborhoods. So they'll often forego that green space, so your lots aren't going to be as usable. And a lot of times I'll have Northerners move down here expecting every house to have a pool like they do in Florida, but unfortunately that's just not the case. Now, we do have more private pools than up north, but just not to the same level as Florida. And luckily, most of our larger communities do have at least one pool, so we're not totally deprived of fun. Let's talk climate, because this is a huge factor for people deciding on which state to move to, especially for my Northerners. They always want to know who has better weather. And honestly, that's going to depend on what you're looking for. If you're looking for an endless summer vibe, Florida is going to be the clear winner, especially in the southern part of the state. But even northern and central Florida will be more tropical than anywhere else in North Carolina. Throughout Florida, winters are going to be short, sunshine is going to be abundant, and the humidity is going to be intense, like really intense. When I lived in Miami, I worked at a place that literally made us sign waivers saying if we worked outside, we would pass out. And people actually passed out. The humidity is relentless. It is oppressive, and it can stick around most of the year. The peak heat index can exceed over 90 degrees from May until October. But I will say this, Florida has the most perfect winters. You're not going to find anywhere in the Carolinas that have as warm or as comfortable as a winter compared to Florida. Carolina's climate really depends on where in the state you are. Here in Charlotte, I think the weather is perfect. It's one of the reasons I've lived here for so long. Since we sit right between the mountains and the coast, we have a really great balance of seasons. And we actually get all four of them, which is something that Floridians love about North Carolina. Because believe it or not, you do start craving some kind of variation in the climate. And the best part is that our weather never gets too extreme. Our winters only last a couple of months. And I actually have a whole video breaking down what winters are like in Charlotte, which I'll link up above. Now, summers are going to be our most intense season because we are still in a subtropical climate. We are going to have humidity, but the humidity is nothing like Florida. If you ever hear anyone complain about the humidity in Charlotte, they have never lived in Florida. It just doesn't compare. Now, if you head out to the coast, the summers will be a lot hotter and more humid, and the winters are going to be more mild than they are here. And then if you head to the mountains, the climate is completely different than anywhere else. The summers in the mountains can actually be quite nice. A lot of us here in Charlotte actually vacation in the mountains during summer just to get a reprieve from the heat. But fall is by far peak season. This is when the leaves start changing and people from all over travel just to see the foliage. And then winters, of course, are going to be really cold and really snowy. Personally, I couldn't handle it, but it is really fun to visit. And you can't talk climate without mentioning the natural disasters. This is actually one of the biggest reasons that I have clients relocate from Florida. So unfortunately, the trade-off of living in paradise is that you're going to have to deal with some pretty crazy weather. Florida is the most hurricane-prone state in the US. And along with that, you get tropical storms, flooding, and even sinkholes, which can be a serious problem in certain parts of Florida. There's even a whole region called Sinkhole Alley. And if you live in that area, sinkholes are a real risk. And when it comes to hurricanes, it's not just the storm itself, it's the aftermath. It's having to evacuate, flooding that can leave homes unlivable for weeks at a time. And flooding isn't just a coastal issue. Because Florida is so flat, even the inland areas can experience flooding. And hurricane season lasts from June to November. That's half the year. So when we're talking volatile weather, Florida is going to be pretty much at the top of the list. Now, in North Carolina, we do get hurricanes if you live near the coast. It's going to be nowhere as intense as in Florida. Since 2010, Florida has had 4 major hurricanes, including a Cat 5. North Carolina has not had any in that time frame. Here in Charlotte, hurricanes really just aren't a thing. So if a really bad storm hits the coast, we may get a few days of rain runoff. But because of the size and shape of our coastline, most of the state is pretty unaffected. I've been here for 10 years, and there's only been one storm that really came close to your basic tropical storm in South Florida. And then when you go to Western North Carolina, the concern isn't hurricanes, it's winter storms. The mountains will get their fair share of snow and ice. Here in Charlotte, because we're in the middle of the state, we really don't get much of that. So we might get a day or two a year of snow and ice. And when that happens, the whole city completely shuts down, but not because it's too extreme, but because it's just so rare we don't have the equipment to handle it. So honestly, it feels like a snow day for adults. Everybody stays home and it's just a little bit of winter magic before all the snow melts in an hour. So when it comes to natural disasters, we just don't deal with them to the same capacity as Florida. If you want to know more about what it's like to live in Charlotte, check out this video here. I think you'll like it.